Hello, welcome to the channel again. Thank you for joining me on the channel. I wanted to do a real quick video on a strange sounding topic, but things that I don't add to my family tree. Once again, things that I don't add to my family tree. Now, I know the purpose of a family tree is to add as many relatives as you can find and to add as much information about those relatives as you can find in order to understand them better, to know them better, to realize where you came from and the people that made you who you are. But there are some things that I just don't add to my family tree. Now, others might, but these are things that I don't add to my family tree. The first is people who are not relatives. People who are not relatives. Now, that may sound like a dumb statement. You might think, well, of course, nobody adds people who aren't relatives to their family tree. I mean, people don't just say, oh, I think I'll add Tom Brady to my family tree. So now Tom Brady's in my family tree. I'm not talking about just picking someone at random and adding them to your family tree. I'm talking about adding people who are connected to people in your family tree, but who are not relatives. So we're going to use as an example here the family that we looked at in the video the other day, Roland Stanley and Lucy Richards. Now, Lucy Richards is in my family tree. If I click on her, expanding her link there, I have her parents. She is. I'll look at her profile. She is my first cousin, twice removed. Definitely related to me. And Roland is her husband, so he deserves, or belongs, not deserves, but belongs to be in my family tree. But if you look here, you'll see that Roland had two other wives. Ordinarily, a second wife would be someone who's not related to you. Um, in fact, Ancestry, who keeps track of relationships for you automatically, if you look at Roland, it says husband of first cousin twice removed, and that is a standard, typical person to be in your family tree. But if you look at Olga's, it says wife of husband of first cousin twice removed. Now that, yes, that relationship is there, but it's not a family type relationship. And if we added anyone, a father, mother, a child, in fact, let's add a child between Olga and Roland. We'll just add a child, and I'll just call it child. I won't put any other information in there. So now we have a child that is the child of Olga and Roland. And when we click on the profile to see the relationship, you'll see there's not a relationship there because that child, that young person, is not a blood relative, not in my family tree. So let me delete this person. So ordinarily, you wonder why I would add Olga or Constance into my family tree if they are second or alternate spouses of Roland. Well, I will add alternate spouses or second and third spouses for the only reason is to flesh out the life of Roland so that I know more about Roland. If I can find when he got married to Olga and when that marriage ended, when he got married to Constance, when that marriage ended, and when he got married to Lucy, then I'd be able to flesh out his life further in his life story. So I've done that for those two ladies, and if you look in Roland's profile, you can see I have his birth, his marriage to Olga in 1918. His wife died about 6 months later. Then he married again to Constance, just a little over a year after that. And then about a year and a half after that, they were divorced. And then just a few days after they were divorced, he married Lucy, and Lucy and Roland were married from 1921 until he passed away in 1979. So 58 years they were married. So I will add additional spouses onto people if it helps me to flesh out the life and to understand or know the life of Roland better. But the most important reason why I add them into my family tree is, as you can see here, there are three children. Roland had three children, Dora, Robert, and Norma. And I want to make sure that I get the correct mother for each of these children. Now, in this particular case, Lucy was the mother for each of these children, but they could have easily, not Olga, they were only married for just a few months, but easily he could have had a child with Constance, and one of these three could have been Constance's child. In that case, I would not add them because it just is just a person that, as we saw when they added the child to Olga, is not in my family tree using the general convention of genealogy. And if I start adding people to Olga, parents or brothers and sisters, just because I can connect them to my family tree, then I'm going to have a family tree full of people who, yes, they're connected, but they are not really what I would call family members. Now, this can be sensitive for some people. I know, for example, if um, your brother or sister is married and your brother or sister-in-law has relatives, you'll probably want to add them into your family tree because they are, you consider them family. Perhaps you hang out with them and live by them and know them very well. But I wouldn't add them to my family tree simply because they are not blood relatives. Yes, they are connected through marriage, but they aren't blood relatives, so I wouldn't add them to my family tree. I realize you may want to add a few people like that to your family tree just because you consider them family, whether they are blood relatives or not. So that's the first thing that I don't add to my family tree is people who are not relatives. And as I showed, Ancestry tracks that relationship status for you, so it's easy to see. If you click on, if you're adding someone, you think, I wonder if that person really is a relative. Click on their profile, and Ancestry will show you. If there's no relationship there, then by genealogical convention, they are not a relative. The second thing that I don't add to my family tree is, let me call it embarrassing information. I just I have a newspapers.com subscription, so I just entered in the word intoxicated back in 1950 just to see what would show up. And here we see a few articles about people who ran into some trouble. For example, here is this one individual fined $100 in costs by the mayor for charging of driving while intoxicated. If that was a member of my family, I hope no one's watching he's a member of your family. But if that was a member of my family, I probably would not add that. I don't know that it really builds up my knowledge of that person, although it would build up my knowledge individually. And now that I've seen it, great. Maybe I'll download it onto my computer, but I wouldn't add it to a tree. It wouldn't help someone else watching, probably. But now, that's not a hard and fast rule. You say, well, what's your hard and fast rule? I mean, if it's, 60 years, 70 years, 100 years, would you add something like this? Perhaps if it was a much more distant relative, I may add some information that I guess if it was more recent, it might be considered um, embarrassing. I probably wouldn't add anything that if the person was still alive or was the parent of someone who is still alive, or maybe even the grandparent of someone who is still alive. I just wouldn't want maybe someone to stumble across something that would be embarrassing that maybe the family didn't know about or they didn't know about. And it just, I don't know, let them find it on their own, I guess. But I just would, I don't like to add embarrassing information into my family tree. Now, I do have some people who are in there who are convicted of crimes for perhaps more serious events, and I will add that into my family tree if it affected their life. If they were sent to prison or something like that, then I probably would add that because that's a major point in someone's life if they spend time in prison. So I would probably add that on a more distant relative, not like I said, and not on someone who is more recent, and that would provide embarrassment to someone in the family who saw that information. So that's just kind of my feeling on that. Of course, you can certainly do whatever you feel comfortable with in your family tree. But those are the two things that I don't add. I don't add embarrassing information into my family tree, and I try to add as little possible people who are not blood relatives but just connected to my family tree. Um, I'm sure that Olga Elford has parents and perhaps siblings that are in someone else's family tree, and that would be a blessing for them to know something about her. So I'll put her in here as well. Plus, it builds up the life of Roland and helps me to know him and then Lucy a little bit better. So those are the two things: embarrassing information about people and people who aren't in my family tree, who aren't relatives, but perhaps could be connected to my family tree. Well, I hope you have a great day, and I hope that made sense. Hope you are able to find things in your family tree about the people that are in it so that you can know them better, the people who made you what you are today. Thank you for joining us today in this little short video.